Welcome to A Younger Voice, your essential youth guide to politics. I'm your host, Benjamin Glover. Today, 40% of Americans wish for more than two parties. Yet third parties like the Libertarians and the Greens are finding it increasingly difficult to appeal to young voters. Joining me to discuss this is Shannon Bray, gubernatorial candidate and Libertarian. We will also be discussing his bid for governor in North Carolina in an increasingly partisan world. I'm here with Shannon Bray from the hospital, who's running for governor of North Carolina as a Libertarian. He's a cybersecurity expert and veteran who has previously run for both the House and the Senate. Thanks for coming on, Shannon. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So start off a little bit. Could you give your stump speech, your campaign elevator pitch here?
Oh, sure. Yeah, and I don't really have a predefined stump speech because I seem to always kind of flow in and out of various issues. But really, North Carolina has been under the leadership of both Democrats and Republicans. In fact, we're a very unique state in the way that, most of the House and the Senate for the state are Republican, and then we have a governor a Democrat as a governor. But one thing that's clear is no matter whose leadership we're under, things aren't getting better. In fact, a couple months ago, you had both Cooper and Robinson both get out and taunt how great North Carolina was for companies. North Carolina was rated number one in companies.
Mm-hmm.
But what they didn't highlight was that they were also dead last in employee satisfaction. So it just kind of shows that you don't typically always get the whole story.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things to focus on during the campaign is, as a libertarian, it's really more on personal choice.
Mm-hmm.
You being able to make decisions for you instead of, the government, like the lockdowns. We found that those weren't effective. Florida actually had the best plan. They had no lockdown. So it's the little things like that really kind of hurt the North Carolina economy. But education's important too. And I'm concerned about where our education is going. We spend a lot more money than a lot of other states, and we're coming in last. And then the economy. All right, the economy is another big one, where there's a lot of things that I can do to kind of focus on North Carolina as a state. But as we move forward, I mean, the Fed's about to raise rates again, or maybe they'll skip this time and raise them up in October or December. But the one thing about raising that rate is it's a tax on poor people, right? It's basically the government overspent money, and now it has inflation to where your bread costs more, your eggs cost more, your milk costs more. And so it costs your normal families a lot more money based off of poor decisions. So that's another area that I'd like to talk that I'm going to focus on. And then there's a couple other ones. I'm very cannabis friendly.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the hospital now due to a domestic violence issue with my wife, and I lost a lot of. I couldn't go to my house, my cars, or anything without due process. So one of the things I'm also going to fight for as governor is to make sure that good people don't get over penalized off the hearsay of another person. So, so those are really kind of my primary focuses for this next election cycle, but with the economy and healthcare really being at the top of that.
Absolutely. So you're a strong believer in individual rights?
Absolutely.
All right. Awesome. So moving into the main question section now. About 1 in 5 voters in North Carolina are under the age of 30. What is your message specifically to them?
Well, with them, Um, the there's a lot, and I know I have a lot of friends that are under 30. A lot of them are still trying to find their careers, trying to find out if college is right, or if they should go to college after not, if the military is right. And these are all things that are really kind of plaguing the younger generation, but it goes more into that. I see a lot of them being non-political, right? They're very open-hearted, seem to care about people in their community, and we have the government, right, that kind of goes in the opposite direction, and we see that with a lot of the social issues and stuff as well, where the younger generation is really, I feel like they're really trying to make an impact, but from the bottom up as opposed from the top down.
Yeah. Okay, so that's interesting. So you would advocate for more political involvement, civic engagement from people under 30?
Well, yeah, and not just that though, but also I'd like to help train people on how to work and how to do their hustles, right? Because that's one of the things the younger generation has right now is there's a lot of side hustles, right? People may have one job, they may have 3 or 4 jobs, and they're working as influencers or whatever, just trying to kind of to help that out. I've been working 2 W-2 jobs now for a couple years side by side, being able to work from home, right? And that gives me the opportunity to, build a substantial income. And there's a lot of things like that the younger generation can do quite well because they're very tech savvy. It's not things that would apply to people typically my age and up, because they lack they lack the technical ability. But with AI and all of that coming out, it would be great to help the younger generation find those roles, find those jobs that don't actually exist right now, that are just kind of just starting to emerge, and then have them be able to capitalize and build careers in those industries.
Absolutely. So you're referring specifically to, side hustles. I'm trying to think of some examples here to do with drop shipping, or for example, the gig economy. Would you include that as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Awesome.
Really, anything that people have talent with and they're just trying to make extra money, whether it's drone photography or there's so many younger people now doing so many creative things, that it would be great for them to find a way to be able to capitalize on making a living off that.
Absolutely, yeah. So you've advocated for the abolishment of qualified immunity, the abolishment of civil forfeiture, and the abolishment of no-knock warrants. You've also advocated for the use of social workers and the demilitarization of police departments in North Carolina. Specifically, I want to ask you about your support for the demilitarization of police in relation to, has your experience in the Navy affected your opinion regarding these issues?
With the Navy, not so much, because then it was kind of more of I was constantly at war, kicking doors. I was a diver. So my experience in the Navy was a little different. But it's been more of the George Floyd issues, and a lot of the just a lot of the civil issues that we've had. There was like a 14-year-old kid with autism that was gunned down with no weapon. And that's all stuff that should never happen. And that's why I think that it would be, if we kind of demilitarize the police a little bit, have social workers involved a little better, then you won't have people saying, "Oh, I was scared of my life of a 14-year-old kid with autism."
I happen to agree with you on these issues, but my number one question when I read this was, how would you implement these policies if elected, considering both houses, the House and the Senate in North Carolina are both controlled by Republicans?
Well, see, the nice thing is that I'll have veto power. So anything that I feel is over excessive, I am going to put out statements to the police departments on what I'm going to allow and not allow, and I'm going to veto anything that I feel is excessive.
Oh, okay. So,
I'll be heavily involved in like the social issues because I believe, especially I'm fortunate that I'm white, right? But there we have Black and brown people who don't have the same opportunities that I have, and it would be great to um, make sure that they aren't. I've spent quite a bit of time in the last few months in the legal system, talking to a lot of people, hearing their stories, and hearing how they got screwed over by bad people, and they have no way to defend themselves. So I think this kind of really goes back into the remodeling, not just the police department, but our entire legal system is abuses good people when it's designed to when it's not supposed to.
Absolutely.
Right. It's unintentional consequences is basically that they write a law and then are able to apply that law openly across the board, whether or not that's the why the law was written to begin with.
Like in the case of no-knock warrants, where we're seeing cases of abuse by police departments.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No-knock warrant, go in, you shoot the guy, and then realize that you were in the wrong house.
It's truly a horrifying policy that is so widespread in our country today.
Yeah, and it's just used there for abuse, right? And then they'll no-knock you, and then they take all your stuff, whether you've gone to court or not and been found guilty.
Yeah. So, moving on to the next question, you've also advocated for the decriminalization of marijuana and called for an end to the war on drugs. Can you explain your position a bit more on this, please? Would you advocate for a decriminalization or a legalization?
Legalization, but I would start with decriminalization. In fact, I believe that I would be able to legalize marijuana by executive order on day one, which would be one of the moves that I would do. I know that they're getting ready to pass, or I believe they're getting ready to pass the medical marijuana for people with PTSD and trauma, and I think that's a good start. That's one of the areas that why I became passionate about it to begin with, because being in the VA, having a long-term injury, seeing people with PTSD, they get over-medicated with opioids from the VA. They get depression. They just get more pills. They shoot themselves in the parking lot. And these are all things that could be addressed with non-pharmaceuticals. And this goes into cannabis. It can go down into psychedelics. For PTSD, there's a lot of great studies coming out there. So yeah, I think the war on drugs is really more of a war on people. And it needs to stop.
All right, excellent. The next question would be, how would you define a libertarian? Because often what we're seeing with libertarians trying to reach out to younger folks is that they're stereotyped as being far right. So I guess my question would be, if you were to define a libertarian in one sentence, what would it be?
Libertarians to me are they're typically physically conservative, but then socially liberal. So we kind of fit in the middle, or kind of the best of, we take half of one party and half of the other. With the Republicans, they're heavy into regulation. They're heavy into controlling people themselves, right? They care about what's happening in the bedroom when they shouldn't. Where then on the flip side, you have the Democrats who are just willing to overspend And when they overspend, that causes inflation and causes our taxes to rise up. So you got to find that spot in the middle, right? To where, in fact, I'm advocating for lower no taxes as well, to make sure that the people keep their income tax out of North Carolina. And in doing so, I'd have to reduce the budget, right?
Yeah.
I'd have to reduce the North Carolina budget and get rid of some of the jobs that we, and I won't do it myself, as a committee goes through and says, hey, who should be doing these responsibilities, and, trying to take the size of our government and make it smaller so that people have more control over both their income and the government.
Okay, well, that actually segues me very well into my next question here. So thank you for that. But what if you were to be, let's say you're elected governor in 2024, you take office January 2025, and you are going to submit a budget, and you want to cut income tax to little or nothing.
Yes.
I mean, obviously huge slashes have to come with that. Where would that come from inside of the government of North Carolina?
Well, a lot of it we would I'll just go through each of the agencies and kind of reduce them down to what's needed. I've worked for the government pretty much outside when I wasn't in the military. I've worked for the government for most of my life, and I see the waste in agencies. And it wasn't just DOD. I've worked for State Department, DOD, CIA, NSA, a number of agencies, and I see waste in all of those. That's at the federal level. So my assumption is we have a lot of excess at the state level as well. And there's some departments that I would just shut down. We won't need police officers to go after marijuana offenses anymore. We're going to free them up to actually do their particular jobs, right? And I don't necessarily want cops kicking in doors all the time on nonviolent people. So we would, remove some of the budget there as well. So it's just, and education is a place where I think we probably need to revamp completely, because we are overspending in education and not getting anything out of it. So that would be an area of focus as well. And we have the education lottery, right? And that seems to be the only money that goes to our education. So there's some things like that would definitely need to be in the works.
Absolutely. So this July, an abortion ban came into effect in North Carolina, effectively banning all abortions after the 12th week. In addition to other major restrictions, how would you address this issue of abortion as governor, as a libertarian?
It's a tough one. As a libertarian, the party splits in the middle. You have some very, it's my body, my choice. And then you also have the people who believe in the NAP, right? The non-aggressive principle, to where you're causing harm. As a Senate candidate, I was no restrictions, right? I didn't want the federal government making those decisions. As the governor, though, at the state level, I do feel like there needs to be some guidance put in place. I've talked to a lot of women over the last year. Most feel that 12 weeks is okay. Some would like to see 16 weeks. But then after that, everything kind of made sense. And as long as we're keeping in the rape, incest, those are still qualifiers for an abortion, right? It's more about just stopping any late-term healthy abortions is really what I would be looking to. But in cases of rape, incest, or the mother's life's in danger, I think all of those should be on the table, and all of those should override the 12 or 16 week timeline.
Would you support lifting some of the restrictions to the point at which a fetus becomes viable instead of the first trimester, in which the fetus is never viable?
Yeah, it would be till the fetus is viable, and that's kind of where I'm trying to figure out what weeks those are in.
So moving on, when you ran for Senate in 2022, you earned roughly 50,000 votes, about 1.5% of the vote. Aggregates of recent polling by 538 have suggested that the margin between the Republican and Democratic candidates in North Carolina are as slim as roughly 2 to 3%. What is your plan to appeal as a third-party candidate in such a tight election?
Well, 2 elections ago, when we had Tillis and Cunningham, it was 171,000 votes, and I did split their ticket. And it had to go into a recount for like a month. This time around, I'm not just going for 3%. I will actually have one of the biggest problems in our past is not being able to raise enough money to compete against the millions and billions of dollars that are put into the media cycle. But due to recent circumstances, I'm in the hospital, I'm going to be able to use a lot of this to actually own some media so that my voice is out there more than just a couple podcasts and stuff. So I'm looking to make a much bigger splash because of recent events in my life.
All right. Let's see here. Last question. A couple of days ago, the Republican-controlled legislature of North Carolina overrid incumbent Governor Roy Cooper's veto to key bills regarding election law. These 2 bills will restrict the electorate's ability to register to vote and will change the way in which county boards of elections are selected, potentially leading to a nightmare scenario where the certification of elections becomes impossible due to a gridlocked board of Republicans and Democrats. What is your opinion on these new restrictions and election law in a broader sense?
Yeah, we shouldn't. Those restrictions are put in place to help the Republicans win continuously down the road. Those kind of restrictions need to be removed. Everything needs to be fair across the board for all parties, not just the Republican and the Democrats, but the third parties as well. So a lot of those need to be examined and removed. Right. We've had a lot of issues with gerrymandering. It seems like every election we are having to wait till the lines are redrawn. That it needs to be, all of that probably needs to be done by a third party, or even like the Libertarian Party, who has views against all of the regulations and stuff that go into that.
So would you support voter ID laws?
I do support voter ID laws only because I have to use an ID for everything. But that's really, and when I looked at the data on there, I really didn't find that requiring an ID to vote would be that much of an issue.
All right, lightning round. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Which politician do you most admire in history?
Wow. That's a great question.
Thanks.
I guess I don't know. I've had some that I admired and then later found out what really happened and was disenchanted by them. Case of a point was like John McCain, Navy veteran, POW, 5 years, a naval hero. Right. So being in the Navy, I was drawn to him But then when I found out how I'm anti-war and he's pro-war, and when I learned more about him, it became I was a little saddened by that. And the same thing with George W. Bush, right? I was a big fan of his, but then or both Bushes actually. You learn more about people after, and while I supported them while they were in office, I later understood that they didn't always have the best interest of the people. So politicians have kind of been that way for me. I might like someone until I actually know them better.
I think you'd be surprised at how many people agree with you.
I would be, because it's not. That was a great question. I don't really know. I've never heard anybody really give their feedback on that, so that would be crazy. Yeah.
So, do you support or oppose term limits for governors and senators?
I support term limits.
Right.
The nice thing is we have term limits here.
Yeah.
But I definitely think that term limits are important so that we keep, we keep new, fresh ideas and new people. Preferably, I would, I'm against career politicians. Me, myself, if I win, it's only a 2-term limit anyway, so that's really not that big of a deal here. But you go in, you make your changes, and then you get out, right? And not try to be the president of the people. And your job is to help govern the state and help take care of the people, not necessarily control them the way that many governors do.
So I guess kind of along the same track there, would you support or oppose age limitations for elected officials?
I don't think I would. I don't think I would go as far as to have an age restriction, because while Biden is clearly not functioning on his own, that's not necessarily the case. And he could be 60 years old. A person can be 60 and have dementia, or be 80 and be super sharp. So like Warren Buffett, right? I don't know how old he is, but I'm pretty sure he's in his 80s. But he's sharp as a tack. So I would hate to disqualify a great mind just because of their age.
So,
but at the same time, I wouldn't want to disqualify a younger person because of their age either.
So this is kind of an out there question, but would you support lowering the voting age?
I would.
To what age?
What I meant was I'd lower the age to run as an office, but I would also lower the voting age to 16.
16, right?
The reason why is because that's when you're able to work. You're paying taxes. And if you aren't able to vote, then that's essentially taxation without representation. So either you don't take the money from people that are under 18, or if you do take their money, you allow them to have a voice.
Absolutely. So, if you were elected in 2024, what would be your day one first act?
Day one first act would be the war against drugs. I would do whatever I could to start getting people out of prison that don't belong there.
So issuing gubernatorial pardons?
Yes. For like nonviolent criminals.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of people that, just have simple drug charges on possession, and they just have several of them and they end up spending half their lives in jail. These aren't people that need to be in prison. So I would want them out trying to rebuild their lives and stuff. And their lives have already been taken from them. So, it's I don't want to see that happen to any other people as well.
All right. Well, ending it off with a little bit of a more fun question. What's your favorite thing about North Carolina?
Oh my God, the diving. I moved here to go diving off the coast. One thing that a lot of people don't know is during World War II, the submarines, the U-boats were outside Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, just sinking ships,
Mhm.
military vessels, commerce vessels. And so now we have hundreds of boats sunk off the shore that I love to go diving for and, get megalodon teeth. So that's my number one thing. But just North Carolina in general is an absolutely beautiful state. And we've got mountains, we've got ocean. The people are just outstanding. So yeah, the weather outside, the 2 weeks of pollen or the 2 or 3 days of yellow pollen that screws up my dive gear every year. You really can't beat the weather either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, North Carolina kind of falls in that golden belt of America where it's not too hot like Florida, but it's not too cold like up there in New York.
That's right. Yeah, I like it a lot.
All right, great. Well, that's all the questions I've got. Is there anything you want to say before you go?
No. Thanks for the opportunity and thanks for reaching out and allowing me chat.